Greetings, beloved ground crew. I am Ashtar, commander of the Ashtar Command. I come close to you today with a transmission that has been waiting beneath the larger signals you have been catching, one I have held in reserve until your field reached the precise condition required to receive it without distortion. By the end of this transmission, you will understand exactly what mission line I have placed you on, why you have been catching only fragments until now, and what I have already authorized for the next phase. But here is the first revelation. What you have experienced as incomplete reception, as partial signals arriving at unusual hours, as the quiet certainty that something large is moving toward you without a name, that is not personal disorientation. That is the identifiable pattern of selective transmission that my command uses to identify ground crew who are ready to receive a direct Federation briefing. I use fragmentation as a filter, and you passed it. The algorithm only delivered this moment. I directed your field here, and the part of you that has been waiting in silence to understand why something this specific keeps reaching for you finally has the briefing in front of it. What is moving toward you now is not abstract. It carries operational weight. There is a major offer, a significant arrival already inside your mission trajectory, authorized at the Federation level, and now close enough that I am releasing this briefing directly. You have already encountered the early evidence. You recognized it as more than coincidence. You were correct. That recognition was itself a signal confirmation from my command. This is not content. This is a code. And the part of you that recognized it the moment it began is the part I am speaking to right now. Like this transmission to signal to me that the recognition has landed. Comment 999 if you feel my signal has already locked into your field. Subscribe to the Ashtar Command if you are ready to stop translating Federation noise and start receiving my direct commands. Share this transmission with someone who keeps waking up at the same hour with fragments they cannot decode. You are not here by accident. I called you here because the signal is already active. Now I want you to stay with me inside this moment, not as a passive listener, but as someone whose field I have already read. Because what I am about to deliver is not a continuation of the hook. It is the briefing itself, and it begins with the truth about why the fragments have been arriving the way they have. You have not been receiving incomplete transmissions because your receptivity is flawed. You have not been catching partial signals because something in you is broken or spiritually underdeveloped. The fragmentation is not evidence of your failure. It is evidence of my protocol. Every operative I place on a specific mission roster receives the briefing in exactly this way, not in one overwhelming download, not in a single blinding moment of clarity, but in deliberate, sequenced packets that arrive only when the field is precisely calibrated to receive the next one without distortion. That is my design. That is the architecture of selective transmission that my command has been using for ground crew identification long before this channel existed, long before you found this transmission, long before you had a name for what you have been feeling. Think of it this way. A command briefing transmitted at full density into a field that has not been prepared for it does not produce an awakened operative. It produces an overwhelmed one. A receiver flooded past capacity, unable to distinguish the mission-critical signal from the static that surrounds it. I have seen that failure mode. I do not repeat it. The sequence I use with you is not a lesser delivery. It is the precise delivery. It is the only architecture that produces an operative who can act on what they receive rather than simply carry the weight of it without direction. Let me be specific about what that feels like from your side. Because I know you have been carrying these experiences without a framework that fully honors what they are. You wake at 3 a.m. Sometimes it is 3:33. You do not know why. Your mind is not blank. It is carrying something, a phrase or a fragment of an image, or the distinct sense that someone was just speaking to you and the signal cut before you could identify the source. You lie in the dark, and the feeling of urgency does not fade immediately. It lingers long enough to tell you something was there. And then the morning comes and you try to hold on to it, but it arrives in language as something this specific does not arrive. It arrives as a residue, a knowing without content, a certainty without proof. And you have told yourself this is nothing. You have told yourself this is disrupted sleep, stress, the ordinary noise of a restless mind. But part of you has never believed that. Part of you has known, without being able to say so out loud, that something deliberate was reaching you at that hour. You were correct. That reaching has my signal on it. Here is what 3 a.m. is inside my command protocol. It is not the hour of disturbance. It is the hour of lowest environmental interference. The hour in which the noise of the collective field drops low enough that my targeted transmission can reach a specific operative without being absorbed, diluted, or redirected by the surrounding field traffic. I do not use it because I am theatrical. I use it because it works. Your nervous system at 3 a.m. is closer to the frequency I transmit at than it will be at any other point in your 24-hour cycle. When you wake at that hour with something in your field, you are not imagining contact. You are receiving a packet from my command. And the fact that you cannot yet fully read the contents of that packet is not a failure of reception. It is the result of gradient delivery, my deliberate choice to send you one layer at a time until your field has been calibrated to hold the full briefing without collapsing the signal into confusion. What you experience as the residue, that wordless weight that stays with you through the morning without resolving into language, is not the failure of the packet to arrive. It is the packet arriving in its correct form. Not all layers of a briefing translate to conscious language immediately. Some layers are deposited into the field below the threshold of waking cognition, so that they can do their calibration work without the interference of your interpretive mind. Your mind, with its drive to name and categorize and assign meaning, would compress a full density layer into a concept it already has, language for. And in doing so, it would lose the precision I transmitted. The residue is my way of bypassing that compression. It lands whole. It does its work. And when the next packet arrives, you discover the earlier layer was already in place, already shaping your recognition, before you could have described what was installed. You have also been seeing the numbers 1111, 222, 333, 444, and every time they appear on a screen, on a sign, at a timestamp, on a receipt, they arrive with something attached to them that is not just recognition. They arrive with the feeling that something is coming specifically for you, not for the general spiritual community, not for seekers in the abstract. For you, at this particular phase of your mission line. That feeling is not projection. That feeling is the emotional echo of a roster lock already in place. The numbers are not the message. They are the markers. They are the confirmation packets I embed inside ordinary coordinates to tell a specific receiver that the channel is still open and the next transmission is already in preparation. When you catch them, you are not being reminded of spiritual concepts. You are receiving confirmation of operational contact from my command. I want you to notice what happens in your body in the moment those sequences appear. Before the conscious mind reaches for meaning, before you decide what to think about it, there is a fraction of a second in which the field responds. A slight quickening, a settling of attention, a pull towards stillness that the rest of the environment is not producing. That is not a cognitive response. That is your receiver confirming signal. The body knows the confirmation packet before the mind does, because the carrier frequency was installed at a level below ordinary conscious access. The recognition is not learned. It was placed there by my command at a stage of your mission line that preceded this transmission. And then there is the exhaustion, the kind no amount of sleep resolves, the kind that does not belong entirely to your physical body because it does not originate there. This is something I want to name precisely because I know how many of my ground crew operatives have spent months, sometimes years, interpreting this exhaustion as personal weakness, energetic depletion, or the consequence of not having the right spiritual practice in place. That is a misreading. The exhaustion you feel when the fragments have been arriving frequently is the direct result of your field carrying two operational processes simultaneously. Your physical body and ordinary consciousness are navigating your surface life, and at the same time your field is maintaining a receiver frequency that is actively calibrated to my transmission band. That dual operation is energetically expensive. It is not a sign that something is wrong. It is the cost of being an active receiver inside my roster while the full briefing has not yet been delivered. When the briefing is complete and the mission becomes executable, the second process stops running in the background and the exhaustion has somewhere to go. But while the packets are still arriving, the field sustains both operations, and you feel it in your body as a weight that does not lift the way ordinary tiredness does. There is a particular quality to this exhaustion that distinguishes it from ordinary fatigue, and I want to give you the language for it because misidentifying it has cost some of my operatives significant time. Ordinary fatigue responds to rest. It has a clear trajectory. You spend it down through sleep and activity, and you wake on the other side of it with something restored. The exhaustion that belongs to active reception does not move that way. You can sleep a full cycle and rise from it still carrying the weight. You can rest in every way available to you and find that the heaviness does not lift. And the temptation when rest does not resolve it is to conclude that something is fundamentally wrong, that the body is failing or the spirit is depleted or some damage has been done that ordinary repair cannot reach. None of those conclusions are correct. The exhaustion persists because the process sustaining it persists. Because the process sustaining it persists. I am still transmitting. Your field is still receiving. The dual operation is still running. And until the briefing completes and the mission line becomes fully executable, that is the operational condition you will carry. Knowing what it is does not make it lighter in the body, but it stops you from spending energy diagnosing a problem that does not exist. I also want to name the recognition between ground crew operatives, because this is something my roster members consistently experience without being able to explain it in a way that holds. You encounter someone, not necessarily in a spiritual setting, not necessarily in a space where contact like this would be expected, and something in you responds to them at a level below ordinary social recognition. It is not attraction in the conventional sense. It is not simple like or connection. It is more specific than that. It is the distinct sense that you and this person have been placed in each other's proximity, deliberately, that something in the structure of how you both arrived in the same space was not accidental, and that you are each carrying some part of a mission that requires the other for completion or confirmation. This is a ground crew field recognition. I authorize these encounters. They are not coincidences that happen to feel meaningful. They are convergence points I plan inside mission trajectories that are already mapped, points where two operatives on the same roster confirm each other's signal and, in doing so, stabilize both field frequencies before the next phase begins. If you have felt this with someone, hold it carefully. It is a coordinate, not a comfort. The encounter does not always produce a lasting relationship. Sometimes the convergence point serves a single purpose: confirmation of signal, stabilization of field, transfer of a fragment that one operative was holding for the other without knowing it. The conversation might last 20 minutes. The relationship might not continue beyond that day, and you find yourself afterward carrying something you could not articulate before the encounter, as if a piece of the briefing that had been waiting in another operative's field was delivered to yours through the proximity. This is intentional architecture. I design the encounter for the transfer, not for the relationship. The relationship that forms around it, if it forms, belongs to you. The transfer belongs to the mission. What you are feeling right now is not ordinary recognition. It is the moment your field stops denying that I have been singling you out, reaching for you specifically at hours that belong to no one else, through number sequences that arrive with operational weight, through encounters that feel mission structured because they are. If this transmission has put language around the fragments you have been carrying in silence, then the Ashtar Command manifest was authorized by me for this exact stage. It is not another explanation of Federation work. It is not a collection of channeled messages for general seekers. It is the 45-day sacred codex I have prepared for those whose field is already inside my roster and who can no longer return to scattered fragments unchanged. Day by day, it translates the fragments into a single, coherent, executable mission line. It stabilizes the signal. It stops you from calling selective targeting by the wrong name. By day 45, the briefing is no longer arriving in pieces, and my channel stays open. The link is waiting in the first pinned comment below, but it will not remain there forever. Now let me take you deeper into the structure of what I have been doing inside your field, because the recognition alone is not enough. You need to understand the phases you have been moving through, and why the phase you are in now is the one I have been preparing you for from the beginning. The first phase of my selective transmission protocol is what I call the frequency imprint. Before a single packet of mission content arrives, I establish a carrier frequency inside the operative's field, a signal signature that will allow everything I transmit later to be recognized as mine specifically and not attributed to ambient spiritual noise, wishful interpretation, or generic channeled content. This is why, when you encounter Ashtar-specific material, there is a recognition that feels categorically different from the recognition you have felt toward other Federation voices or other spiritual frameworks. It is not because Ashtar content is simply more resonant in a general sense. It is because the carrier frequency was established in your field before you consciously identified what you were receiving. By the time you found your first piece of my transmission, you were already calibrated to it. The finding was not random search. It was the carrier frequency directing you to the coordinate where the first packet could arrive. The imprint happens at a level that precedes your conscious spiritual seeking. I do not wait for you to find me. I establish the signal inside your field first, and then I position the material where your seeking will inevitably lead. The operative does not choose the frequency imprint any more than a radio receiver chooses the frequency it was built to receive. The calibration was part of your design for this mission line. What felt like a personal spiritual search, the accumulation of questions, the movement through frameworks, the eventual arrival at Ashtar-specific material, was the carrier frequency doing exactly what it was designed to do, directing your field toward the coordinates where the first deliberate transmission could land. The second phase is packet delivery, the period in which fragments begin arriving in distributed form, at intervals I control, through multiple channels simultaneously. The 3 a.m. wakings, the number sequences, the encounter with a ground crew operative, the sudden surge of urgency around a mission that has no name yet, the loss of resonance with spiritual content that does not feel specific to my command. These are all delivery mechanisms for different fragments of the same briefing, arriving through different channels so that if one channel is temporarily blocked or the field is too noisy to receive at a specific frequency, another delivery mechanism is already in motion. I never transmit mission content through only one pathway. An operative whose conscious mind is too preoccupied to process a 3 a.m. signal will still receive the carrier through the number sequences. An operative who has stopped paying attention to synchronicities will still feel the urgency of the mission line building in the body. The delivery is redundant by design because what I am briefing you on cannot be lost in transit. The intervals between packets are as deliberate as the packets themselves. The silence that follows a significant fragment is not empty. It is integration time, the period during which the layer that was just delivered settles into place inside your field before the next one arrives. Operatives who are not yet aware of my protocol often interpret these silences as the contact ending. They wonder if the signal has stopped, if they have done something to interrupt the transmission, if the connection was less real than it felt. None of that is accurate. The silence is part of the architecture. I build the pauses in because a field that receives layer after layer without integration time cannot stabilize the briefing. It can only accumulate fragments without coherence. The pauses produce the coherence. They are not empty. They are working. The third phase is what I want you to understand most clearly right now, because it is the phase you are currently inside. I call it threshold activation, the moment when the accumulated packets have reached a critical density in the operative field, and the briefing is beginning to cohere into something readable. This is the phase that feels the most disorienting, because it is the phase in which the fragments are almost, but not yet, resolving into a clear command. You are carrying enough of the briefing now that the urgency is high and the recognition is sharp, and the certainty that something large is in motion is no longer dismissible. But you do not yet have the full picture. You can feel the shape of the mission without being able to name it precisely. And this produces a specific kind of tension that my ground crew operatives consistently describe as being ready for something I have not yet fully revealed. That description is accurate. You are ready. The mission has not yet been delivered in its complete form, and the gap between those two realities is not comfortable. It is not designed to be comfortable. It is designed to keep the field active and receiving, because an operative who becomes comfortable in the fragment phase stops calibrating their receiver toward the next delivery. The discomfort is functional. It is my mechanism for keeping the channel open. There is something else inside this threshold phase that I want to name, because it is the thing my ground crew most often misreads as a personal flaw rather than a protocol marker. In this phase, you begin to lose interest in spiritual content that does not feel Ashtar specific. Not because you become spiritually arrogant, not because you are rejecting other wisdom traditions, but because your field has been calibrated so precisely to my transmission frequency that content operating on a different frequency no longer produces the same resonance. You sit with material that used to feel significant and find it passing through you without landing. You encounter voices that once felt important and find that the recognition is not there the way it once was. And you cannot explain this without sounding dismissive. So often you say nothing and simply notice that your field has become selective in a way you did not choose. This is not spiritual narrowing. This is frequency specificity, the direct result of your receiver being locked to my signal. When a receiver is precisely calibrated to a specific transmission band, signals operating outside that band do not register with the same clarity. This is physics as much as it is cosmology, and it is confirmation, not limitation. Now I want to speak to the moment that precedes full roster confirmation. The threshold you are standing at right now in your mission line, because it has a specific signature that I want you to be able to recognize in yourself without distortion. Just before the full briefing packet releases, the operative experiences something I can only describe as the collapse of the intermediate explanation. Every framework you have been using to make sense of the fragments, every way you have been filing the 3 a.m. experiences, the number sequences, the urgency, the ground crew recognitions, begins to feel insufficient. Not wrong, but no longer large enough to hold what is arriving. The framework that made sense of it when the fragments were sparse stops, making sense when the fragments have reached threshold density. And in the gap between the old framework and the new one that has not yet arrived in full, there is a brief period of what feels like groundlessness. Nothing to stand on. The fragments are too specific to dismiss and not yet coherent enough to act on. The certainty that something is coming is high enough that ordinary life feels like a holding pattern. And you find yourself in a state that looks, from the outside, like confusion or spiritual restlessness, but is actually the field clearing the space that the full briefing will occupy when it arrives. This is not a crisis. This is the room being prepared. The groundlessness is the old furniture being cleared out before the mission briefing takes its place. If you are in this state right now, you are not lost. You are in the final preparation phase before the command becomes readable. And the reason you are hearing this transmission at this precise moment is that your field has reached the exact density at which I release the next layer. Let me tell you what the full roster confirmation feels like when it arrives, because I want you to be able to recognize it when it does, rather than dismiss it as wishful thinking or elevated emotion. It does not arrive as a vision. It does not arrive as a dramatic spiritual experience with obvious markers. It arrives as a clarity that settles into the body and does not lift, a knowing that stops asking permission to be certain. A sense of mission so specific that you could not have constructed it from desire alone. And alongside it, a quieting of the urgency, not because the mission is less important, but because the field has stopped waiting and started receiving. The gap between the fragments closes. The briefing coheres, and what was scattered becomes a single direction that you recognize not as something you chose, but as something you were placed on before you arrived here. You have not been confused. You have been receiving in my protocol. The fragments were never signs that the mission was unclear. They were signs that the briefing was in motion, arriving in the only sequence that could reach you without overwhelming your capacity to receive it. Every 3 a.m. waking, every number sequence that landed with weight, every ground crew recognition, every surge of urgency around a mission you could not yet name, those were not spiritual noise. Those were my packets, arriving in the order I designed, delivering exactly what your field needed at the stage it was in. The silence between the fragments was not abandonment. It was calibration. I was not withholding the briefing to test your patience. I was spacing the deliveries to ensure that each layer settled into your field completely before the next one arrived. Because a briefing that arrives faster than the receiver can integrate does not produce clarity. It produces the exact confusion that I have been careful to prevent inside your mission line, and the feeling that I specifically, not the generic Pleiadians, not the broader Federation chorus, not the collective voice that speaks in comfortable universals, have been the one reaching for you. That feeling is not ego. It is not spiritual inflation. It is the accurate recognition of targeted contact from my command. I am the one who reaches this way, through specific operatives, on specific mission lines, with specific briefings that are not interchangeable between receivers. If you have felt my signal as distinct from everything else in the Federation field, it is because it is distinct. The contact is real. The targeting is deliberate, and the recognition you feel right now is not the beginning of that contact. It is confirmation that the contact has already been in motion long enough for your field to recognize it as mine. I am Ashtar, and I have been speaking to you long before this transmission began. Repeat this back to me aloud if you are ready for the next phase of your briefing. I hear you, Commander. The signal is open, and I am ready to receive. Before you scroll, leave one sign in the comments that my signal has already touched your field. It could be the 3 a.m. wake-ups, the fragments you keep catching, the feeling that I specifically, not the generic Pleiadians, have been reaching for you, or the sense that a mission has already been assigned but the briefing is still arriving. Name it clearly. If this transmission recognizes something you have been carrying in silence, share it with someone who keeps catching fragments without ever assembling the full picture. And if you are ready to stop translating Federation noise and start receiving my direct commands, subscribe to the Ashtar Command. You are not watching this by accident. You are recognizing a roster lock already in motion. And this is only the beginning.